Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States?
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then
All right, watch this moment closely, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. Before we even get to the evidence, before we even get to the accusations, Crockett does something that instantly flips the room on its axis. She calls out the witness not for what she believes, but for refusing to do the most basic thing you're supposed to do in a hearing: answer questions. This isn't subtle. This isn't gentle. This is Crockett walking into the room already fed up, already done with the games, already convinced that the witness is not here to provide clarity, but to run interference. And here's why that matters. When a lawmaker makes the strategic choice to open with a process fight, to say, you're not answering, you're dodging, you're wasting the committee's time, it means they're setting up the rest of the exchange as a credibility showdown. They're not just questioning the witness. They're questioning the witness's entire purpose for being there. The tension you're about to see is about more than political differences. It's about one side saying, you're not playing straight with the American people, and the witness trying to frame herself as the side being mistreated. And the minute Crockett starts comparing this witness's conduct to what any first-year law student should know, that's the moment the room realizes this isn't going to be polite. We're going to walk through the two biggest arcs of this hearing: Crockett's front-loaded, precision-style confrontation, and the later pivot when Bondi tries to turn things around and redirect the heat back at Democrats. But before we get to that reversal attempt, we need to see exactly how Crockett sets the trap. Watch what happens when she moves from calling out evasiveness to laying down moral bright lines so simple a child could answer them. She's not doing this to get information. She's doing this to mark the contrast. One person answers clearly. The witness refused to. This is the foundation of the entire clash. So let's go to the first raw footage block and watch how Crockett builds her case, step by step, accusation by accusation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, I'm not going to ask any questions of this witness because this witness has revealed that she has no intentions of answering questions. But instead, I'm going to ask some very basic questions really quickly of my colleague, Becca Ballant, if she will answer: right or wrong, raping children?
Wrong.
Right or wrong, killing random citizens?
Definitely wrong.
Right or wrong, enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States?
Definitely wrong.
Okay, thank you, because I probably never would have got that with our witness. Our witness who somehow is a lawyer but does not understand how it works with witnesses. I'm not really sure what law school she went to and what all kind of cases she tried, but typically when you come into a space and somebody's a witness, then they sit there and they answer questions instead of asking questions. And then we also have this objection that we use as lawyers called non-responsive, when a witness fails to actually answer the question. But nevertheless, let me address the survivors, because that's exactly who they are. They are not victims, they are survivors. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. We are currently the laughing stock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ, as we see kings and queens falling everywhere around the world. But we don't know the basics of right and wrong in this country, because it's not about partisanship. And that's why I applaud Thomas Massie, because he's the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. But nevertheless, let me keep going. My Democratic colleagues have been attacked this entire committee hearing. They have been lied on, and frankly, the American people weren't looking for that. They were looking for answers about the corruption that they see coming from this administration. In the written testimony of this witness, of this particular witness, she stated that when she took office, she had two main goals. The first was to end the weaponization of justice, and second, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. In fact, your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away, and at your direction, DOJ...
Okay. Let's break down what you just watched, because every line Crockett delivers is doing double duty. First, she forgoes asking the witness questions. That alone is a tactical statement. It says, I don't believe you will engage in good faith, so I'm not going to give you the platform to dodge. That shifts the hearing from inquiry to indictment. She's not fishing for answers. She's building a case that the witness, and by extension the DOJ leadership the witness is defending, is fundamentally unserious about accountability. Then Crockett does something extremely effective. She brings in another member, Becca Ballant, to answer simple questions about basic morality. Why does that matter? Because Crockett is constructing contrast. It's not about the content of the questions. It's about showing that when she asks someone honest, they answer plainly. But when she asks the witness, nothing. Silence. Evasion. Deflection. That entire sequence is psychological framing. She's saying, look how easy it is to answer these questions. Anyone can do it. Except you. That puts the witness on the defensive before she even speaks. And then Crockett escalates. She calls out the witness's legal credentials. Now, normally, lawmakers avoid attacking professional qualifications too directly because it can come off as personal. But Crockett leans in, hard. She uses the legal term non-responsive to underscore her point, effectively saying, I can prove you're dodging using the vocabulary of your own profession. This is where the momentum shifts. We've gone from a critique of conduct to a critique of competence. Next, she pivots to the survivors. Here, she grounds the entire moral argument. She doesn't refer to them as victims, she names them survivors. That is intentional. In high-stakes hearings, whoever can anchor the emotional center usually controls the narrative. Crockett is saying these survivors have shown more moral clarity than the entire DOJ. Whether you agree or disagree, that's the emotional high ground play. Then, she broadens her attack. We are the laughingstock, she says. That's not fact-finding, that's political framing. It's a way to suggest the stakes are national, not personal. She even praises a Republican colleague, Thomas Massie, for having a backbone. That is not done casually. Bipartisan praise is symbolic armor. It tells the audience, my critique is not partisan, it is about conduct. And from there, she moves into the real payload, the accusation that the DOJ spends more resources on arresting journalists than on prosecuting predators. Now, whether those claims reflect reality is irrelevant for our purposes. We're analyzing the rhetoric and dynamics in the room. Crockett is using that claim as a springboard to paint the DOJ as an agency with distorted priorities. And this is where the pressure truly tightens. When Crockett says the witness's boss, the president, admitted to taking away free speech, that's not a question. That's a narrative bomb dropped in the middle of the hearing. And because she's not asking for clarification, the witness has no window to respond. Crockett is using one-way framing for maximum emotional effect. By the time she lists the journalists she says were arrested, the grand juries she says rejected DOJ attempts to prosecute political figures, and the cases she says were dismissed, the point is not the specifics. The point is the pattern she is alleging. That the DOJ fails at its core mission and is led by someone unfit for the job. When she says, you don't seem to be good at your job, that's the line that hits hardest. Because at that moment, the witness isn't being challenged on decisions. She's being challenged on competence. Crockett closes this first arc by hammering corruption, obstruction, and misplaced loyalties. And then, she yields. But that yield isn't surrender. It's punctuation. She stops, not because the pressure is off, but because the case she wanted to lay out has been fully delivered. And that's exactly why the next phase is so tense. Because after all that, after being called evasive, incompetent, misguided, and morally compromised, Bondi finally gets the microphone. And the moment she does, she tries to flip the script and take that same moral clarity weapon Crockett wielded and aim it back at Democrats.
Mr. Schmidt is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Bondi, thanks for being here. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we talk?
I do. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, my friend, for many years. I find it interesting that she didn't even want to try, Congresswoman Crockett, to ask any questions because she certainly did not condemn her leader, Hakeem Jeffries, for taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted. And I will be brief to give you your time, Congressman. This is what she didn't want to talk about. Texas, from Cuba, convicted, homicide, arson, weapon offense.
Convicted.
You know,
So what we
Estrada.
talking about? Convict some of these
Convicted.
perpetrators that
Homicide.
rape these women that are
Chairman,
sitting
time
behind you
time
that
belongs
you
to the
refuse to
gentleman
even
from
acknowledge
Kansas.
they are here.
Time belongs to the
Texas.
gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a few seconds
You
back
bet,
to make
you
up
bet.
for the yelling? Thank you. General, did you have anything
Congress.
further to say?
Texas, convicted of homicide. Cecil Joseph from Dominican Republic. Texas, convicted for kidnapping, rape. Khalid Khan from Afghanistan. That's why they want to talk about Epstein and not what's happening in their.
All right, now let's break down what Bondi tries to do here. Because it's a classic defensive maneuver. When you're under fire, pull the fire alarm in the other direction. She starts by thanking her colleague, which is standard, but listen to her first substantive move. She immediately invokes Hakeem Jeffries and claims he took money from Epstein. That's not a rebuttal to Crockett's argument. That's an attempt to create a what about counterweight. She's saying, if we're going to talk about proximity to bad actors, your side has baggage too. It's an old strategy, deflection through equivalence. But here's the issue with that tactic in this moment. Crockett never framed the conflict as Democrats versus Republicans. Remember, she even praised Massey, a Republican, for standing up to corruption. So when Bondi tries to drag the conversation into a partisan brawl, it doesn't neutralize Crockett's case. It sidesteps it. Bondi then shifts to listing violent offenders, homicide, arson, kidnapping, rape, and attaches countries of origin to each one. She's using that list to argue that the real problem isn't Epstein or Trump connections, but immigration-linked crime in Democratic states. Again, whether the claims are accurate isn't the point. The dynamic is the point. And the dynamic is this. Crockett attacked the witness for evasion. Bondi responds by changing the subject. Crockett centered survivors of abuse. Bondi centers criminal offenders from other countries. Crockett accused the DOJ of failing its mission. Bondi accuses Democrats of failing their states. This is where the hearing becomes two entirely different realities colliding. Bondi's list of offenders is meant to shock, to overwhelm, to take the emotional pressure Crockett applied and redirect it. She wants the audience to forget that Crockett's core accusation was about the witness not answering questions. Instead, Bondi tries to make the conversation about which political party is tougher on crime. But here's the key. Bondi never actually addresses Crockett's framing. She never engages with the claim that she dodged questions. She never pushes back against the charge of non-responsiveness. She never even tries to refute the idea that her testimony was evasive, and because of that, Bondi's pivot reads not as counter-argument, but as escape. The chairman's interjection, "Time belongs to the gentleman from Kansas's," gives Bondi precious cover. It allows her to deliver a batch of talking points without being forced to respond to Crockett's original case, and by the time she's finished listing offenders from Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Afghanistan, she claims this is why they want to talk about Epstein instead of what's happening in their own states. Again, notice the structure, shift the lens, reframe the stakes, move the battlefield. But in doing so, Bondi unintentionally validates Crockett's core argument, that when put under scrutiny, she avoids direct answers. By the end of the hearing, the contrast is unmistakable. Crockett controlled her segment with moral bright lines, escalating pressure, and pointed accusations directed straight at the witness. Bondi controlled hers by retreating into counter-accusations aimed broadly at political opponents. And that's the story of this hearing. One side applying concentrated pressure toward the witness, and the witness trying to deflect that pressure away from herself. This is why the cold open moment, the one you saw at the top, matters so much. Because Crockett wasn't just calling out the witness, she was diagnosing what the rest of the hearing proved. That instead of responding, Bondi would pivot, redirect, and avoid. And what makes this clash so compelling isn't just the back and forth. It's the fact that both sides walked into this room seeing two completely different missions. Crockett wanted accountability. Bondi wanted to survive the exchange. And in a hearing like this, those missions collide fast. Whether you agree with Crockett or Bondi, the energy of this hearing is undeniable. It's tense, it's sharp, and it exposes exactly how quickly a congressional room collapses into two realities when witnesses and lawmakers refuse to share the same frame. And that's why the footage you just watched went viral, because you're not just seeing disagreement. You're seeing a breakdown of shared language, shared priorities, and shared purpose. That's what makes hearings like this so explosive. Every side is fighting for control of the story, and the story never stays still. If you want more breakdowns like this where powerful people get pressed on the record, hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Who do you think came out stronger in this hearing? And what was the one moment that changed the whole exchange?